So good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Winder, I'm the WA State Manager for the Finance Brokers Association of Australia. So good morning, everybody. We're joined by Caitlin Stuart, the Outsourcing Solutions BDM at Affordable Staff, who will be presenting on Outsourcing 101 for brokers with affordable staff. Now, shortly I will pass you over to Caitlin. However, just to let you know, should you wish to ask any questions during the presentation, please provide these in the chat box in your control panel for the webinar. Caitlin will then go through these questions at the end of the webinar, either verbally or by responding directly via message. Now, the internet may cause some lag or cut in and out occasionally. Please bear with us, as every man and their dog is on right now, but you'll get the link to the recording following this webinar, and that will be grouped with all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel. Now, I'll pass you over to Caitlin to commence her presentation, and we haven't really chatted since Melbourne won the flag last year, so I'll give you some glory about that just to start off with.
Thanks, Mark. Do appreciate it. Yeah, it was a bit of a, waited 33 years to see it, and I had to watch from my living room, which was a bit disappointing, but hopefully we can back it up and do it again this year. So not
it was much better in person as well.
Thanks very much. Just rub it in.
Yeah,
look, round one, hoping to be there at the MCG to face off the doggies again, so we'll see how we go. Hey?
Awesome. Well, good luck. Over to you, mate.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that, Mark, and thanks for getting up so early to help with this morning, obviously over there in WA. It's an early one. So good morning, everybody. I must admit, I am quite astounded at how many of you have decided to register and join me this morning. Quite surprised, but it is obviously a symptom of what's happening in the industry, both here, both offshore, just the general inability to hire staff. I'm hearing brokers who are waiting for months with ads out, tried 4 different ads, all various different recruitment tactics. And look, it's a symptom of every industry worldwide. Simple as that. So I am Caitlin Stuart. I work for Affordable Staff. I am their BDM for financial services. For those of you who have seen me previously in the past, yes, I have come from industry, was a finance BDM, so I do understand the challenges that brokers go through day to day, and just the general process and legislation and just the industry overall, which I think is really helpful for brokers when they're first starting their outsourcing journey. So I work for Affordable Staff. We are an offshore outsourcing company. We have a team of over 500 working in the Philippines, working specifically with SMEs around Australia and New Zealand. So today we are going to focus on Outsourcing 101 for mortgage and finance brokers. Now, I obviously talk to a lot of brokers every single day, and a lot of the same questions get asked. I think a lot of the same maybe myths potentially are floating around in the outsourcing industry, and just general misunderstanding, which is because nobody's ever really come out and said, hey, this is actually how it works. You really need to talk to providers in order to get a really deep understanding of it. So hopefully today you can walk away with some understanding and maybe a bit of a clear plan if your plan is to actually look at outsourcing in 2022. So for today's agenda, we're going to go through why outsource, just really quickly. Why consider outsourcing? Right. We're going to look at the 2 outsourcing options for brokers. So, or the most prevalent, I guess, you've got your pay per file, and then you've also got virtual assistant services. Now, in terms of from there onwards, we are going to focus a lot on the virtual assistant side of things. Why is that? Well, that is because it is the most comprehensive and complex part of outsourcing for brokers. Pay per file is pretty straightforward, whereas virtual assistant contains quite a significant amount of stuff and differences and things that you need to be aware of as a business owner in order to have success. So we're going to talk through training, security, compliance, really important, and also just some general tips. So helping you get onto your outsourcing journey. So why would a mortgage broker outsource? Well, lots of different reasons. I think at the moment, a lot of brokers are considering it simply because they are not having any luck with onshore hiring. What they're trying to do with onshore staff, not being able to get anybody, no applications, or maybe nobody that's suitable to the business. In terms of why you would look for staff, well, obviously you've reached capacity, and that's a symptom that we've seen for the last 2 years in most mortgage broker businesses, that the volume is there, it is not slowing down. and you're looking for some assistance. Maybe you've got clients that are going to other brokers because you've not been able to address them, or maybe you can't take on new clients, or you're working weekends or 16-hour days. It's just, there's a whole lot that can go into it. For some, it's obviously a solution or an alternative to hiring staff onshore. So hiring staff onshore obviously comes with not only the process of going through that recruitment, you then also have to consider salary expectations, which I'm hearing of admin staff asking for $90,000. I don't know, it seems a bit high. And a lot of, if you're a sole operator as a broker, you're just not going to be able to afford that. It's as simple as that. So an alternative there obviously is outsourcing as well too, and you don't need to worry about things like super and insurances and all of that sort of stuff that just keeps adding up on top of the actual salary itself. For some brokers, they actually just a little bit unsure of what the future may hold, and whether that's the industry overall or whether it's their business. They want to look at options that potentially doesn't have the commitment, I guess. So, employing staff is a commitment, especially too once they're past that probationary period. If you don't need them anymore, have to make them redundant, that's another process. There's a whole other set of laws that you have to go through, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas with an outsourcing solution, it's not necessarily set in stone. You can typically, depending on the provider, actually terminate your contract quite simply or quite quickly with only, say, 30 days notice, or even potentially a couple of days notice as well too, and we'll talk through that. So let's have a look quickly at Perfile. So for many providers, they will either do one or the other. And that's important. So for us, for Affordable Staff, we focus just on virtual assistants. We specialize in it. That's where we want to put all of our attention into it, because we want it to be a very good option for our clients. It can be really difficult to be in both spaces, because especially too when you're considering the Perfile side of things, a provider in that space needs to be really, really on the ball with changes to systems across all aggregators. They need to be able to focus on changes in policy, potentially, depending on what you're paying for. There's a lot that goes into it. So we can't really focus our attention on both. So with Perfile options, you've got operators both here in Australia and offshore. So it's still outsourcing, regardless of whether or not it's here or offshore. And usually, obviously, you would go direct to that provider, or sometimes your aggregator may actually provide a Perfile processing service as well too. In terms of what you can look at from that Perfile processing, it ranges again. It can go from this much to this much. So, for most brokers will go for just the apply online input. So you've obviously got to get to that point where the file is packaged and ready to go into apply online before you send it off. Some processing services offer end-to-end processing, and then you're obviously paying a bit more for that. In terms of ongoing, why is this a good option? I think Perfile is a really good temporary solution. So I'll often get brokers come to me and say, oh, I don't have enough work for 40 hours. And I go, well, look, I can't help you, unfortunately. Maybe consider Perfile until you're at that point where you've got enough work to sustain a full-time employee as a virtual assistant. Ongoing, it may not necessarily be as cost effective, especially too, depending on the types of service you're paying for as well too. So for example, I've seen some Perfile processing that can go in excess of 500 plus GST per file. That's the cost of a weekly VA, essentially, when you really break it down. So ongoing, long term, not really sustainable, but really good to help you if you're in a bit of a bind, or you're just going through maybe a one-off workload increase and things like that as well too. So we're going to talk through virtual assistants now, and we're going to talk about this for the rest of the webinar. I did see in some of the participants, some of my clients have actually come in and joined me, which is really lovely. Hopefully you'll learn something. I don't know that you will, because we've obviously already gone through this already, but really do appreciate the support and having you here. But what is a virtual assistant? Well, at its very crux, it is essentially an administrative staff member, generally located offshore. I have seen some VA services here in Australia. I think that's probably more aligned with, you know, really high level VA. So like email management for, you know, businesses or people that are really short on time that need just a couple of hours a week or a day sort of thing. In the broker space specifically, it is typically a full-time resource. Now, I can't speak for all providers, but I'll just talk through why it is that Affordable Staff only offer a full-time resource for brokers. The role is complex. There is a lot of systems, there is a lot of processes, there is a lot of things that a person needs to know in order to do the role, but then also to then do that role within your business as well too. All of our team members are hired as full-time employees. And so that means we need to find them either a full-time position or at least 2 part-time positions. Now, we did trial part-time in the broker space, and it didn't work for lots of different reasons, but for mostly is because of the complexities and the differences in businesses that they were working with, 2 clients. But also too, the nature of this particular role is that you need to be flexible. You need to be able to, you know, potentially drop everything and submit an urgent file. If you're on a 20-hour basis set roster, that's not necessarily something you can do. We often did find as well too that many of our clients wanted to shift to 40 hours quite quickly. And as a result, they would be disappointed because their team member was already allocated to working with another client. So it just didn't work for lots of different reasons. And that's exactly why we personally don't do it. I'm of the understanding that many other providers in this space also do not do it. In terms of what can a VA do? Well, a VA at Affordable Staff can essentially do your admin. So we say focus on the low value time consuming tasks, especially in the initial instance. But we've got team members that have been working with their clients for a number of years who are essentially para brokers and very much valued members of their teams as well too. So we do draw a line. We do not allow our team members to give credit assistance in any way, shape or form. And I think that for most aggregators and industry bodies as well too, they probably would prefer that means that stays with you in your business there in Australia. So when we're talking about virtual assistants, we actually have a couple of different options. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a non-managed service. So a non-managed service is a provider or an organization, typically with an offshore entity and offices. So you'll often find Philippines, India, Nepal as you know, popular selections or countries. The non-managed provider will assist you, the client, with basic recruitment services and manage the salary payment to the employer. And that's about where their support ends. So this is a cheaper option if you're looking for that assistance with the recruitment and things like that. However, day-to-day and ongoing, you typically will not receive any, if at all, support from that particular company. No training, maybe a little bit of IT support sort of thing, but there's usually not really an account manager or a team leader that you can talk to or bounce ideas off or provide feedback to or anything like that. So it is cheaper, usually, depending on the inclusions and the location, because the location really does change the price range, not even just on country, it actually changes on area in the country as well too. But you're looking at around the 1,500 to 2,000 per month sort of thing. That is usually, obviously, excluding GST. With a non-managed service as well too, you're more than likely going to be paying maybe in US dollars to an offshore entity. So maybe something you might like to consider is actually working with an Australian entity, because that means usually that you're paying Australian dollars and you're also paying GST, so it could potentially be tax deductible. The other option when you're considering virtual assistant is a managed service. So the opposite of non-managed service. So Affordable Staff are a completely managed service, and it's exactly in the name. So again, we're located offshore, Philippines, India, Nepal, usually the top 3, and a managed service provider will assist you end to end. So not only from the recruitment, but also to day-to-day. So for the life of your entire relationship. In terms of the recruitment process, a managed provider will actually do all of the screening, the advertising, usually will offer some basic training to assess competencies, and depending on whether or not they're a specialist in this specific area. We'll also provide structured training when it comes to mortgage broking tasks as well too. They will offer PC setup, onboarding for you as a client, because it's quite a bit that has to go into it, depending on your needs. Onboarding for the team member, IT support as well too. So that's just to get started. Once you're then with your team member working day to day, they should also be providing you with ongoing support. And that relates to everything. So HR compliance first and foremost, day-to-day management with a team leader or HR or whoever, as well as account managers onshore. I think that's really important, and I think a lot of our clients really appreciate having me as a sounding board, because sometimes you're just not really sure, like cultural differences, or can I say this, or is it appropriate if we do that, and things like that. Sometimes it's really good to have somebody local who you can talk to. A managed service will also provide training and upskilling as well too, and staff engagement initiatives, keeping the staff happy, wanting them to come into work, keeping them engaged. That all comes back to retention, and making sure that the team members are being looked after. We want to avoid any questions of, human trafficking and things like that. Look, I hear it all. I hear it all every day, and I hear some horror stories as well too. So, a managed provider will really help with that, and just generalized feedback and coaching. So some people, some brokers in particular, I know lots of brokers become brokers because they're not people leaders, and they leave the banking system because they don't want to, manage teams and things like that. And look, to be quite fair, I was the same. I'm not, like, people leading and things like that, just not really part of my skill set. And so having somebody that you can turn to when you're not sure what to do, if there is negative feedback, or even if it's positive feedback, or even if you're just not too sure, like, how do I approach this particular subject, that sort of stuff, we will manage it for you. We'll take that stress off you. Now, because you're getting a bit more for that, you are obviously paying more. So cost dependent on the inclusions, the location, experience of the team member, and how the recruitment methodology works for that particular company is also dependent. So usually between the 2,000 to 3,000 per month. Again, that is exclusive of GST as well too. So you need to factor that into it. Now I'm just going to talk through our recruitment process. And this is the type of recruitment process that a managed provider will go through. So really detailed, very intensive, and deliberately difficult for a reason. So we specifically only look for really high quality candidates because we want our customers to have a really good experience with us. Simple as that. So this in itself is 7 steps. For us, it's including 8 for the mortgage broker team, because we do actually include some specific training that is they have to pass in order to work with a broker. So when we're shortlisting candidates, we know what to look for in terms of their background, their education, their experiences. We've been doing this for 15 years. All of our team members are interviewed by our Australian-based staff. That's really important, because then we can actually gauge, how do they communicate? We ask really, hairy questions to try and see, like, what are your plans for the future? And you're not going to leave us in two weeks, are you? And things like that. We go through minimum standards when it comes to English, maths, problem solving skills, all of that sort of stuff. And then part of our process is that we actually go one step further. We do personality profiling on every single candidate that walks through our door. In the broker space, we also use personality profiling to actually get the right fit for your business. So, we go one step further. Reference, health checks, police checks all get done, training gets done, introductions and onboarding and, getting started. That's the sort of service you should be expecting to see from a managed provider. Before I move forward, I'm going to just quickly touch base on something that will often, come up from time to time when I'm talking with brokers and costings and things like that, where people are looking for the cheapest possible solution. And we really need to step away from this as an industry for lots of different reasons, but I'm trying to protect my brokers when I talk through this. So, you obviously get people out there that are contractors, right? They'll put their services up on the internet on like find a contractor site, $3-4 US an hour. Okay, I get it, it's cheap. it's fantastic. It can be really good as a money saving solution for you. However, you really need to consider that there is so much that a provider provides for you that you just don't see on the surface that they're doing in the back end. We've got a support team of 90 staff, and that's just operations like that. They're just there to help make sure that the company's running smoothly and that, tech's working and that your data is safe and secure. So just some things to consider. If you go direct to a contractor who works from home, you need to consider that they will not have professional indemnity, no public liability, all of that sort of stuff. So could potentially put you in a position where you're not protected. They also probably do not have the same rigorous security and cybersecurity settings that a provider would have. In addition, can be very difficult to monitor and manage their productivity as well. Quite often I hear stories where people are, they're working full-time hours, but they're also working full-time hours with somebody else, and, random people jumping on and doing the, calls and stuff like that. Lots of different things can go wrong. But also too, at the end of the day, HR compliance, like what do you understand the local laws, the local employment laws? Yeah, they may be a contractor, but you may actually have to provide them with things like leave entitlements and, bonus structures, and what happens if there's a dispute, who do you turn to? So just things to consider. That's just very, very quickly on the surface. There's so much that goes into it when it comes to compliance and security that can go wrong when you consider this particular type of option. So now, moving on to, let's talk about training. Now, again, just something that as an industry, I think that a lot of people have this misconception is that an outsourcing provider is going to be the magical fairy that's going to fix all your business problems. I'm here to say that that's not the case. Outsourcing providers, just like us here in Australia, in terms of, businesses trying to recruit for staff, we're all going for the same talent. Yes, for example, in the Philippines where we're located, it is, a lot of people in the Philippines, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of experienced and well-established staff that are looking for jobs, right? So we work here at Affordable Staff off the recruitment methodology that attitude will always trump experience. We don't get bad habits. We don't get, combative type behaviors and things like that when we consider that. So we'll always look for candidates who have really good attitude and we know are teachable. We'll pop them through training. It is only basic training, however, just to really assess, do they understand the industry? Can they use the tools that they'll be using day to day? And then we also support them with a structured training program once they're placed in with their broker, but you shouldn't rely on that. At the end of the day, we don't know how you run your business, and nobody does. Yes, the system has the same processes everywhere, well, similar anyway, but every business has a different intricacy and different process in that. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the best training is your training. Simple as that. There really should be a combined effort between yourself and also your provider that you talk to. And the provider should be able to provide, what have they learned? What do they know already? Is there additional training that we can get them to do in order to help with various bits and pieces? At the moment, I've got a client struggling with reading financials, for example, and he just can't teach his team member how to do it. So we are working together to figure out, okay, what's the best way to approach this? Who can we talk to? Like, is there resources we can gather? Is there people internally that we can draw on? All of that sort of stuff. In terms of day-to-day training, especially when you're getting started, I don't recommend, sitting there for hours on end, days on end, training your team member. It's not productive, and it also won't help them to keep that information or retain that information long-term either. We say just tackle it 30 minutes a day to start with. So every morning, have a chat with your team member, talk through what's on for the day, go through a task, show them something that you would like them to do. I would say sort of come into it with a bit of a rough plan initially. So, 30, 60, 90-day plans. These are the tasks I really want to get off my desk. This is where I want to save time, things like that. And then with all of your training, you should be getting your team member to record it and then turn it into a documented process. So I know some people sort of go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to have to, document all my processes and I have to figure out, what do I do here? And it's all in my head, and it's just don't even worry about it. Get your team member to do it. So not only does that help with their learning curve, it's obviously building out your processes, but it also can assist to help scale more efficiently or effectively when the time comes. So if you have a team member and you decide to bring on another team member, maybe you're bringing on a new broker and you'd like, each person to have a support staff. Great. They can actually train that new person on your behalf. So consider that when you're looking at providers and what's their process and how do they work and what support do you get from them from that training perspective. But ultimately keep that in mind, that the best training is always going to be from you. Simple as that. Okay, security. Another thing that you need to really consider, and another thing that I think security and compliance in particular isn't talked about enough in the outsourcing space. And as I talked through earlier, obviously the challenges that you have with a direct contractor working with you, just working from home on some random computer, is that this is not going to be looked at. So when considering working with a provider, there's a number of things that you should be doing in order to ensure your security, your data is safe. Check with your person, like your provider, do they have ISO certification? So the International Organization for Standardization is the official name for ISO, but they are the gold standard in terms of security and process. So they are actually standards that companies can go through a process to be audited against in order to then have that tick of approval, essentially. So we are going through that process at the moment, both here in Australia and in the Philippines, which is a tremendous undertaking. We should have it all finalized by April. It's been a very long 18 months, but that's really the gold standard that you're looking for, so that we can say to our clients, we are protecting your data, we are protecting your security. Ask your provider, what sort of firewall and networking do you use? And even if it goes over your head, that's fine. If they've got processes and documents and they can actually show you that this is our process and this is what we use, then that's something. Who monitors this for cyber threats? Do they have a chief information security officer? Do they have an IT team? What happens if security is compromised? What happens then? What about if staff are working from home? How does the provider maintain a secure environment? What processes do they have in place? Like, for example, with affordable staff. So we prefer our team members work from the office. However, COVID, it's unavoidable at times to have a team member work from home. So our PCs are essentially rendered bricks unless they log on to the VPN, of which the VA should only have the password for that. They're only accessible during working hours. We've got full control of our PCs from Australia via Active Directory, lots of different things that sort of flow into it. Is the provider insured for data breaches? That's a really big one. And then what does that mean for you as a user of their services? How is document storage managed? And this is a big one. So with yourself as a broker, obviously we all know the Australian privacy principles. In particular, Section 8 comes into it when you're outsourcing. If your provider doesn't understand their obligations under APP Section 8, that's a concern. Their team members as well too should have quite significant training in Australian privacy principles as well too. So making sure that documents are not being incorrectly stored offshore, and tax file numbers and privacy policies and obligations to your clients and all of that sort of stuff needs to be considered. All right, let's quickly talk on compliance. So different to security. I know it's similar, but different. So you should always be seeking aggregator approval before you decide to go down this path, especially if you are a credit rep as well too. Really important that you talk through this with your aggregator. Aggregators will often have an approved panel of providers that they will ask you to go and talk to first. Sometimes they may be willing to consider a provider off a panel. However, they will ask them to go through quite significant due diligence, I suppose you could say. We've gone through that process with a lot of aggregators and I'm very happy to admit that we've never failed at once. So it's important to go through that process with every with your aggregator, because they need to be able to support you if something goes wrong as well too. So and make sure that they understand what's happening. Segregation and separation of duties are really important, especially in this space as well too. So your VA should have a separate email address and CRM login under your organization as well too. All sorts of stories about, people logging into brokers' logins and making changes or submitting the wrong application, and then it gets into a court and there's no way to actually demonstrate that the VA did that because they're using the broker's login. So really important to consider, and most aggregators now are mandating that that is also the case as well too. Check on the following at your end. Your PI or your cyber insurance is updated. You may need to update that if you start working with the VA. You should also make sure that your privacy policy that you give to your clients is reflective of that, and that comes back to the Australian Privacy Principles Section 8. Make sure that your network and computer security is also up to date as well too. So antiviruses and things like that. That is more or less of a protection to the provider at the other end. Yes, they've probably got excellent security and systems, but it's just helpful to make sure that everybody's got clear PCs, nothing that can come through and try and, attack other clients and things like that. And I just like to highlight Australian Privacy Principles Section 8 because I think it's not talked about enough. Yes, I'll go on about it for months if necessary, but yeah, your provider should have an understanding, your team members need to have an understanding of Australian privacy principles. It's just so, so important. Okay, so I think I may have screamed ahead a little bit fast, but I'll try and slow down a little bit. But let's go through some tips. So if you are thinking about outsourcing, in particular, if you're thinking about outsourcing permanently for long-term solution, things like that, give yourself some time to consider the options. It's not an instant thing. I myself have a wait list around 8 weeks long. The reason I have that is because, yes, we are in demand, but also too because we focus on quality over quantity at all times. As a result, brokers understand that they know that we are going to give them the best possible person for their business, and so they're willing to wait. So yeah, really consider that. If you're needing something like instant that's going to help you, consider the pay per file. But if you're looking at virtual assistants, it does need to be a long-term engagement that you're looking at. It's not meant to be short-term, and yeah, give yourself enough time. Chat to a number of different providers. I'm not here to say, come work with me. I'm here to say you need to make sure that you find the right company that is going to fit your needs. We all differ. We all differ from recruitment tactics through to ongoing support, through to the training that we provide to them. There is just so much that we all do differently. And it also depends on the location and, even what city they're in and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, have a chat to a couple of different people and find the right fit for you. Case studies. So we offer case studies. We've got case studies on our website that you can go through with mortgage brokers. I'm also, and many of my clients are also very willing to have a chat to people considering this and provide references as well too. So seek references. And if you're wanting to sort of maybe go around the company itself and maybe seek some independent references, talk to your aggregator. They may have some people who work with them. Go on various different online forums and see and ask, are you using XYZ? Do you have any feedback about them? All of that sort of stuff. Consider the contract. So in most cases, you'll probably be signing a contract for services rendered with an Australian company. Great. Most of them are usually 12 months rolling contracts. Ours is. However, have a think about what happens if I don't need this person anymore? What happens to my contract? What happens to the person? If we see in the case of, say, working with us, our contract is very flexible. 30 days notice usually is required, no matter how long you've worked with us. We don't charge termination fees. We don't make you see out minimum terms or anything like that. And also too, if something was to happen, maybe you just don't know what life's going to throw at you. Maybe you just need to pause the business for 6 months. We're willing to work with you on that as well too. So make sure that the provider is happy to do that as well. Have a rough plan. You don't need to spend months preparing, just a rough plan. I would also recommend having a look at things like using Loom. Great resource to just do a quick video of a quick process. It may only take an extra couple of minutes on to doing that process, but it's a really good way to start building out a bank of quick tasks like ordering valuations for the various banks or pricing or, things like that. Really adds up over time so that when your team member starts, they've got something that they can actually start to reference as well too. The last tip I have is in terms of making it work. So again, it's not just a magical fairy that's going to fix everything for you. A virtual assistant should be treated like they are a team member sitting next to you. That way they are going to feel like they're a part of the team. They're going to integrate with your, culture. They are going to feel valued. Development, training, all of that sort of stuff. Daily meetings, team meetings. If you have KPI incentives for existing staff, or maybe consider setting them up for your virtual assistant if this is your first team member as well too. Like all of these things just add towards creating a fantastic working relationship, but it's also really helpful in order to get retention and keep your team member around as well too. So really, really important. Before I throw it out to any questions, I am just going to quickly talk through the stuff that I haven't necessarily talked through about us. So we've been doing this for 15 years. We've been focused on the virtual assistant thing for the last 7 to 8 years, and we've been working with brokers since that time as well too. So our team is growing. It's getting pretty big, 500 plus out of Bacolod City in the Philippines. And we've got about 150 working as mortgage broker admin assistants, and that is growing every single week. And we do specialize in mortgage broker support. So we provide initial and ongoing training, industry and aggregator support. So we are working with a number of different aggregators, pretty much all of them, I would say at this point. You've got myself as account manager. I understand the industry, I understand the challenges that you're going through. I'm very much willing to work with each client dependent on your needs. So for some clients, I don't hear from them for 6 months, and that's fine. For others, they like to do regular catch-ups, or before we get to that point, we do a bit of a plan when it comes to training and support and all of that sort of stuff as well too. But with us, you also get support. So if ever I'm not available, I have an assistant. I've also got a team of team leaders. I've also got a team of staff here in Australia. My directors are always willing to jump in and help out if there's a challenge or there's a problem that needs to be addressed. All right, Mark. I think I've just screamed through that at record pace, but
Thanks, Caitlin. Good game's a good game.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we do have a few questions, so just bear with me for 2 seconds. So I think this was pretty much answered in the session, but are the VA set at 40 hours per week, or can it be a lower hours? It's probably what you guys are seeing as a good fit is the 40 hours really, isn't it?
Correct, exactly right. And there may be providers that are offering 20 hours. They're probably not specialized in mortgage brokers. And again, it just comes back to you need to find a home for your team member elsewhere. It gets very complex, messy, not flexible. So we decided to stay out of it.
Yeah, no worries. The next one is this going to be on YouTube? Yes, it is. And I'm just about to drop the link into the chat box there as well. So that is for everybody else. Next one is, can you explain what you mean by a para broker?
A para broker. Well, look, I think a para broker is probably different depending on the person you talk to at the end of the day. It's,
that's why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, I guess so. For some clients, it may look like somebody who just does, the back end processing. So like the broker will see the client, they'll gather all the information, and then they'll just hand it over to the para broker to do everything else in terms of product recommendations, research, calculations, all of that sort of stuff. Some maybe take it a little bit further. They do full credit, I guess you could say. I've heard of some brokers approaching credit officers in banks to try and fill a para broker role here in Australia. So obviously it varies, but it comes with time. It comes with experience. It's not just something that you can teach somebody to do in 2 weeks. You really have to understand the context of the industry, of the credit, of all of that sort of stuff. And we've got team members that can do it. It's just not something that we recruit for specifically because, it's a hard one.
Thank you. Okay, now with COVID and lockdown, what happens around billing? Do we still pay in this scenario? Appreciate it was nothing anyone can control, but what does this mean for us as the effective employer and payer of wages?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on your provider. So at the end of the day, if you're like for us, I'll tell you what we do here at Affordable Staff. So we have been really, really lucky. We have had maybe for the last 2 years, due to COVID, we've had maybe 2 days where we haven't had a team member show up for work overall across the entire business. And that just comes down to our location and the size of our team and all of that sort of stuff. But if your team member is COVID positive, they need to go maybe working from home or stay home for 2 weeks, we'll get them set up to work from home. And so the service will still continue in terms of that. The security measures and stuff, they're all in place, all of those sorts of things. And then once they're no longer COVID positive, we get them back into the office. There have been instances in our city in particular where the government used to, not anymore, thankfully, they actually used to take the team member away and put them in government mandated quarantine. If that happens, we do not charge our clients. We pause billing. You're paying us for a service and we're not providing that service at the end of the day. So yeah, it's all different depending on the circumstance.
All right, thank you. Next one, this has probably been partly answered as well, but so I'll ask it anyway. What is the level of training prior to the VA starting with a business?
Yeah, sure. So for us, it's essentially getting their knowledge to the point where they can identify documents, they can rename them accurately, they have experience using workflow systems, lender CRMs. We go through quite an in-depth, the loan workflow, how it all works, show them things like ordering bells, pricing, obviously teaching them about terminology and things like that, some basic calculations, apply online, of course, lender forms. There's a bit that goes into it. Obviously, we've only got them for 2 weeks. Once our team members pass that, they're then enrolled into a 12-week structured self-learning course, which is essentially getting them up to the point where they can do, all of that end-to-end processing, excluding credit tasks for the broker. So, yeah.
Thank you. Now, Perfile, is that from input to input into apply online to settlement?
It depends on the provider and the service that you're paying for. So some of them are just apply online and that's it. Some of them they'll take the file from apply online all the way through to settlement, but you'll pay more. So it really depends on the company that you're working with and what their services are offered. So we don't do that. We stay in our lane. We just do what we're good at, and that's the virtual assistant side of things. But I know that there's ones that vary across the board.
Props.
Yeah.
Now, do you offer pay per file for asset finance, consumer and commercial?
No, we do not.
Yep.
No.
Okay. Just to answer the same question, that's all right. Now, the last one we've got, are the team well versed in construction or are they strong on basic purchases and refinances?
It's just usually, so the stuff that we train our team members on initially, usually just standard resi, but we do touch on construction as well too. But I think what you need to understand is that we're not teaching them the entire process. We just don't have the time to do that. And that again comes back to the training piece. The best training is going to be your training. We do have some additional training when it comes to construction and considering, splits and, we do show them initially in the initial training about progress payments and how to do that. I think one of the biggest tasks that most of our team members do first week with their brokers is just get on the phone and follow up progress payments. So we've got some basic training, but yeah, there's always going to be stuff that you're going to have to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So, and that would probably then come down to the videos and stuff like that,
Correct.
Training videos on is what I've seen. I've had a lot to do with construction finance in my previous role, and a lot of places do things just that little bit differently, just to make things work for their particular office. So
exactly.
Come down to that for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, well that looks like that's the last question there. So look, thank you so much for your time, Caitlin. I'm really happy with the amount of questions that we've got come through as well. I think it's certainly got a lot of people thinking about what they can do. So look, there's all your details there as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Please reach out to Caitlin if you do have any questions. You will get the contact details after. And as I said, I've put the YouTube link into the chat function there as well, so you can then review it at a later date. But look, thank you so much for your time, Caitlin.
No problem. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody for coming.
No worries. Look, thanks very much, everybody. Have a good day.
See ya.